Hello everybody, it's Walter, your favorite historian, educator, and social studies extraordinaire, here today to teach you a little about the Constitutional Convention of 1787. The facts, ladies and gentlemen. Now there are a lot of myths, in common float about the Constitutional Convention of 1787, which of course gave us our national constitution that is still in effect to this very day. The convention lasted from May 25th to September 17th of 1787 in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. It was held at the then Pennsylvania State House in Philadelphia, now known as Independence Hall, and presided over by none other than the legendary George Washington, who would of course become the first president of the United States. Now, again, these are some facts about the convention to dispel any myths that you might believe about it that are entirely untrue. So first and foremost, one common myth is that the framers were a bunch of old bumbling graybeards, and that is absolutely untrue. The average age of the delegates at the Constitutional Convention was 42, 42 years of age. 4 were in their 20s, 14 were in their 30s, 23 were in their 40s, and 8 were in their 50s. 5 were in their 60s, and only 1 was over 80. All right? The youngest delegate was Jonathan Dayton of New Jersey, who was only 26 years old. And the oldest was Dr. Benjamin Franklin of Pennsylvania, who was 81 years of age. The most influential delegates at the convention, names that I'm sure you've heard of: Alexander Hamilton, James Madison, Gouverneur Morris, and Ed Randolph, were all in their 30s during the Constitutional Convention of 1787. Next, a common myth is that they were all a bunch of slaveholders. Again, that's not true. Of the 55 men who attended the Philadelphia Convention in 1787 at some point, because they were never all in the same room at the same time, only 25 of the 55 were slaveholders, ladies and gentlemen, and that's not even half. Most of the men present thus were obviously non-slaveholders, all right? So it all the more makes it disheartening that they allowed the pro-slavery faction to carry the day, all right? In not in every way, of course, but in certain ways, which I argue could have been victorious on their part versus the slaveholders. But in any case, there were several notably anti-slavery voices at the convention, and they were Gouverneur Morris of Pennsylvania, Alexander Hamilton of New York, and Dr. Benjamin Franklin of Pennsylvania. All right, so there were a tremendous amount of anti-slavery voices at the Constitutional Convention to dispel myths that they were all a bunch of old slave-holding white men. The only thing that's true about it is that they were all white men, yes, but most of the delegates that designed our national constitution did not have slaves, okay? Again, it was presided over by George Washington, all right? And a total of 74 delegates were appointed by 12 of the 13 U.S. states at the time. Of that number, 55 actually showed up at any point between May and September of 1787. There was never a single instance where all these men were in the same room at the same time, all right? Of the 55 delegates who made at least one appearance at the Constitutional Convention, only 39 of them would ultimately sign the U.S. Constitution on September 17th, 1787, which is why we celebrate September 17th as Constitution Day in the United States, all right, if you want to wear that. For the record, the state of Rhode Island sent no delegates at all for the entirety of the convention. This was a convention of experience, all right, and wisdom and a great amount of knowledge. These were very educated and accomplished men who attended this convention, all right? No one there was what you would call a dim bulb by any stretch of the imagination. 8 of these men had signed the Declaration of Independence. 25 of them served in the Continental Congress, all right? 15 helped draft the new state constitutions between 1776 and 1780, okay? and 40 of them served in the Confederation Congress between 1783 and 1787. Confederation Congress was our first national Congress during the period when we were under the Articles of Confederation, which preceded the current U.S. Constitution. Check out my video on that, all right, and why the Articles of Confederation failed. So it is because of this that Thomas Jefferson, writing from Paris, he was serving as the U.S. Minister to France and thus unable to attend the convention, referred to these men as an assembly of demigods, all right? It is unknown whether he meant that in praise or in jest, all right? So the final document would actually be penned by Jacob Challis, who was the clerk of the Pennsylvania State Assembly. He was paid $30 and given 2 days to write the 4,543 word Constitution on 4 pieces of parchment paper. Okay, the beginning 3 words of the Constitution, the preamble, "We the people," was actually a late in the game change by the Committee of Style and Detail, which included Alexander Hamilton, James Madison, Gouverneur Morris, William Samuel Johnson, and Rufus King. Gouverneur Morris is the, arguably and without question rather, the primary stylist for the final text of the Constitution that we know of today. You know, it is through his gift, you know, his ability to write in a magnificent format, happy talent for composition, and a beautiful felicity of expression, which gave us the Constitution that we have today. From beginning to end, most notably the famous preamble beginning with "We the people of the United States." It originally began as "We the people of the states of New Hampshire, Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island, New York," so forth and so on. You get the gist. He is the one, along with the rest of the committee, that made it sound more inclusive in "We the people of the United States" as a whole, as one nation, rather than as just a collection of states. All right? Now, the proceedings were done in complete secrecy. That was a motion made at the very beginning of the convention, certainly endorsed by George Washington and Alexander Hamilton. All right? And we know what we know about the convention largely because of the, extraordinarily wonderful notes kept by James Madison, whose Virginia plan is essentially what formed the basis of discussion at the Constitutional Convention. All right, James Madison, who would serve as our 4th president about 20 years later, is known as the father of the Constitution because his Virginia plan, which called for a bicameral legislature, an executive, and a judiciary, 3 separate branches of government. His Virginia plan is what essentially gave us the national government we have today, even though his Virginia plan was tremendously modified from what he originally submitted. His plan gave us the basic blueprint for what we have today. Again, of course, with compromises and significant modifications. All right. Madison's attention to each and every detail of the Constitution, in addition to him submitting the primary basis of what would ultimately become our national government, earned him the title of Father of the Constitution, which is interesting because Madison himself hated that designation in his lifetime, regularly contending with people who used it that many gifted people created the Constitution, not hardly just through his own intellectual firepower. All right. And there were many other very influential people who did indeed help create the Constitution, including Alexander Hamilton, Dr. Benjamin Franklin, Gouverneur Morris, and certainly a litany of others. All right. So the convention concluded on September 17th, 1787, when 39 of the ultimate 55 delegates would pin their names to it. All right. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is how our Constitution came about, and it would ultimately be ratified when New Hampshire became the 9th and decisive state to ratify it by its own terms in Article 7 on June 21st, 1788. So that concludes this video on facts about the Constitutional Convention of 1787. If you have any questions, leave them down below, and I'll be happy to answer them. Knowledge is power, Take care of yourself, and I'll talk to you at the next video. Peace out.